One of the most fascinating races to appear in Star Trek are the Gorn, a race of terrifying bipedal toothy lizards. To date, there have been only 2 on-screen appearances of the Gorn in Star Trek, the original 1967 episode Arena, and the 2005 Enterprise episode In a Mirror Darkly. In the episode Arena, the Enterprise is lured into a trap where the Gorn forces a fight both on the ground and in space. Let's take a deep analytical dive into the nature of this battle. This episode may not be as clever as Balance of Terror, which I covered in another analysis video, but it is very important. It establishes a number of things in Star Trek, such as the Enterprise's maximum warp speed and the first on-screen use of photon torpedoes. Now, the models I am using to illustrate this breakdown are enhanced and augmented, especially the Enterprise. I always thought the Enterprise shown in the 2009 film, as well as the one on Discovery, went a bit too far with changes from the original, so this one is my own idea of a pre-refit Enterprise. Be sure to check out my video about that as well. As far as the Gorn ship, well, in the original format of the episode, we never actually see it. The ship is said to have stayed beyond visual range. For the remastered version, a CG Gorn ship model is made, and this is what it looks like. Now, I like this ship, but the funny thing about this ship is that even in the remastered version, we only get a grainy glimpse of it from a distance. Although this is a cool alien ship, I've always thought the Gorn designs from the old FASA RPG games were the most Gorn-like. Gorn ships over the years have come in a variety of different portrayals. My impression of the Gorn is that they have a practical but tough approach to most things, so this ship, the MA-12 Cruiser, seems to portray the best of what Gorn ships should be. Okay, let's get into the episode. The Enterprise is summoned to Cestus 3, a remote observation outpost by Commodore Travers, a man known for his hospitality. Travers, or what sounds like Travers, asks Kirk to bring down his tactical team, an odd request as Spock points out, but Kirk dismisses it and seems to delay sending down much of a security contingent, probably with the intention of sending them later. Upon beaming down, they find that the outpost is in smoldering ruins. The landing party comes under attack, and although we don't see it on screen, the Enterprise is attacked in orbit as well. Sulu has to raise shields, which means they cannot beam up the landing party. This is one of Star Trek's firsts, the establishment that you cannot beam people safely through shields. Now, in this stage of Star Trek history, they're not actually called shields, they are called deflectors or screens. We actually don't get the word shields until much later in Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan. However, we can be pretty sure that deflectors or screens are one and the same as shields. The attacking vessel is at extreme range, and the Enterprise cannot even get a very good look at it. Both ships seem to have no trouble exchanging weapons fire at such ranges. Neither ship seems to be able to do much real damage, as both vessels' shields are up. And then we get another first, the use of photon torpedoes. We can assume that, like most torpedoes, photon torpedoes are more destructive than other weapons like phasers if they hit the target. This is certainly an escalation in the battle. Kirk orders their use because the situation is dire, and he is willing to destroy the attacking ship to defend the Enterprise. From Sulu's reaction, we are sure the torpedoes hit, and they do no significant damage to the Gorn ship. From this, we can conclude 3 things. 1. The Gorn ship is extremely tough. 2. The Gorn ship is not very maneuverable or reactive enough to evade the Enterprise's torpedoes. And 3. The Gorn are technologically advanced. On the ground, even Spock comments on this when the Gorn send a feedback pulse through his tricorder, which he then discards and calls the Gorn move genius. At this point, Kirk tells Sulu that he must do everything to protect the ship, even if it means leaving orbit. Other than the reluctance to leave the landing party, Sulu seems to believe the Enterprise is in real danger, and decides to actually leave orbit. This is interesting, since although it isn't spelled out, Sulu must have thought that the Gorn ship could potentially destroy the Enterprise, especially after saying that the Gorn ship could tank torpedoes. Perhaps the Enterprise's shields were at risk of failing. Meanwhile, on the ground, the landing party finds what seems to be a stash of something like photon mortars, and after using only one, the Gorns decide they are done on the ground and beam their ground troops up now that the Enterprise is out of orbit. And then the Gorns break orbit and head to unknown space at Warp 5. Kirk gets back on board and orders the Enterprise to pursue. Now, what just happened here? 3 questions come to mind. Why didn't the Enterprise notice the state of the outpost upon entering orbit? What was the Gorn's tactical objective in this fight, and why did they suddenly cut and run? This could have been sloppy work on the Enterprise's part. Were they so at ease or anxious for some kind of shore leave that no one was on sensors scanning the surface? Or could the Gorn ground force have set up some sort of sensor ghost to make it appear that everything was just fine on the surface? They certainly had time to do this, and based on what they did to Spock's tricorder, they may have had the necessary tech to pull it off. Whatever trickery they were pulling, it worked long enough to lure at least the small landing party onto the surface. I believe that the Gorn's best outcome was to try to capture the Enterprise after a lot of their crew were eliminated on the surface. They didn't quite get the landing party they were hoping for, but the cover is blown as soon as Kirk reports Cestus 3's destruction, and so the Gorn had to act immediately. One may conclude that the photon mortars used on the surface shocked the Gorn ground force, and they decided to beam up, believing that they were in real danger. I'm not so sure about this. The Gorn seemed pretty confident on the ground. The actual prey would probably be the Enterprise itself. I can really only make one conclusion as to why the Gorn decided it was time to go, and that was that the Enterprise could not be captured, and possibly not even destroyed, because the Starfleet ship is too swift. You'll recall that there was no concern at all that the Gorn ship could pursue and run the Enterprise down. I believe the Gorn captain made some observations and calculations. He observed the Enterprise withdraw and concluded that he could not fully bring his weapons to bear. The battle would have been a long, drawn-out, and ultimately frustrating affair, beyond the brawling range of where the Gorn's weapons are probably at their best. The Gorn captain decided that he had gathered enough data about the Starfleet ship, and that this battle was not quite what he expected. It is also very possible that the Gorn is not actually retreating, but following a plan B, and yet another trap. After all traps seem to be this particular Gorn style of combat, we may never know what he had in store for the Enterprise later on. A pursuit follows. Kirk's aggressive nature is inflamed. Kirk seems determined to destroy the Gorn ship. He believes it's a matter of justice and policy. Perhaps his thinking has been influenced by his earlier encounter with the Romulans. Based on what they knew in the events of the episode Balance of Terror, it was the correct decision to fight the Romulans. In this situation, I'm not sure an outright brawl is the best option. I'm with Spock on this one. I would at least be interested in gathering more information before rushing into a fight to the death with these aliens that no one knows anything about. At least in Balance of Terror, Kirk had some kind of plan. If he has a plan for fighting the Gorn in this situation, it isn't very apparent. And so we get another first. The establishment of the Enterprise's warp speed capabilities. By this time, Kirk orders Warp 7 in an attempt to overtake the Gorn ship. Everyone is concerned about this risk. Even Scotty says sustaining the speed, the Enterprise could blow up. But since the Gorn ship apparently can make Warp 7 without issues, Kirk orders an increase to Warp 8, which is even riskier. This is most likely the Enterprise's top speed. Finally, the Enterprise begins to overtake the Gorn ship. But before the space battle can begin, the powerful Metrons intervene, and the rest of the episode unfolds with a staged ground fight that reveals the intelligence of the Gorn, as well that the Cestus 3 colony was set up within Gorn-claimed space, and for this reason, the Gorn responded with a brutal massacre. Of course, in spite of the Gorn's strength and clever traps, Kirk manages to put together a makeshift shotgun to defeat the Gorn. However, in true Star Trek tradition, he spares the Gorn's life, and 2 opponents have an opportunity to connect with greater understanding. Unfortunately, to this day, we have not gotten that greater connection and understanding with the Gorn. It's a crying shame. A Gorn is by now a meme and a cultural icon, and the only area of Star Trek where they have gotten any kind of further attention is in computer games. We do see the Gorn in the Enterprise episode A Mirror Darkly, but that Gorn was a poor CG version of what a Gorn could be. I honestly think that the game Star Trek Online does the best job in their portrayal of the Gorn. Now, I have a few speculations about this entire encounter. First, it may have been a good thing that the Metrons intervened. Like I said before, it is possible that the Gorns could have been leading the Enterprise into yet another trap of some kind. It is not a foregone conclusion that the Enterprise would have prevailed in the upcoming battle. Second, why was the Gorn attack so brutal, and wouldn't there have been some kind of indication or warning that Cestus III had been set up in Gorn space? All the expanded lore in various books, novels, and games indicate that the Gorn are actually an ancient spacefaring civilization, and once firmly held onto a larger area of space. It's possible that the Gorn mindset is that over the centuries invaders have continuously pushed them back into a shrinking area of influence. There may have been what appeared to be some ancient marker in the form of artifacts or ruins on Cestus III, and in the Gorn's mind, this should have been warning enough. Also, as this is likely the Gorn's first encounter with the Federation, it may not have been their first encounter with more hostile civilizations such as the Klingons or the Romulans, both of which are mammalian humanoids. The Gorn may not see much of a difference between Klingons, Romulans, and humans. They may have already experienced incursions into their territory by either of those empires, and decided that the Cestus III outpost is just another incursion of mammalian humanoids. Perhaps further study in relations would have informed the Gorn that the Federation is not the same, only we never really could get a glimpse of what would be an intriguing diplomacy situation between the Federation and the Gorn. In conclusion, I love the Gorn. This was a great episode that has influenced pop culture, and it is true to Star Trek's namesake, although it isn't quite as good as something like Balance of Terror. I see the Gorn as a giant missed opportunity for the Star Trek franchise, but this has given me a lot of space to imagine my own ideas about the Gorn, and believe me, I have a lot of ideas about the nature of the Gorn. Well, that wraps it up for this video. Please tell me in the comments, why do you think the attack was so brutal in Cestus III? What are your thoughts on the Gorn as a whole? Be sure to subscribe and like, and until next time, space friends,